Good evening. The Bothell Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, June 18th will come to order. Let the record show that all members are present and accounted for except for Commissioners Cabe and Bacciuello, who are both absent and excused. I don't believe there are any non-agenda public comments, so we'll move to approval of minutes. And is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, could we have a motion to approve the minutes of April 16th?
Motion to approve the minutes from April 16th.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Let the record show that the motion passed unanimously. I don't believe we have any new business, and so we're going to move forward with our public hearing. And there's several items on our public hearing. This is the public hearing for the 2015 Periodic Plan and Code Update. And there's two elements here that Dave Boyd is going to take us through this evening. A second review of the urban design element, and then our agenda calls it a second review, but I think it's actually a third review, right?
Yeah, I just noticed that myself.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So a third review of the economic development element. And so just by introduction, Dave, please move forward with your presentation, and we're prepared to roll up our sleeves and do the work we need to do today to get through both of these design elements this evening.
Okay, thank you, and good evening. Yes, I'm believe that the urban design element will probably need to come back one last time. I'm actually going to introduce some code amendments related to that, depending on your feedback on the policies. But I do hope that we can wrap up the economic development element this evening. But let's start with urban design. Again, just for those who happen to be watching on TV, I wanted to quickly put up this background that this is to provide a framework for excellent development, physical development in the community. It's not a required element under the Growth Management Act, but the vision statement and the comprehensive plan in general have supported an urban design element for some time now. It contains goals, policies, and actions promoting excellent sustainable development, and we're reviewing it to bring that up to date. So the initial changes that were presented at the initial review were refining the definition of urban design and its purpose, recognizing major planning efforts with significant urban design components that have been done since the previous update, and updates of the goals, policies, and actions. And based on input, new changes include revisions suggested by the Commission and some proposed revisions and deletions of graphics, again, based on the feedback that we received last time. So, to start with the issues that we reviewed last time, starting with the boulevard system, this figure UD1 was modified since the last major update in 2009. We propose extending the boulevard system into the municipal urban growth area in Snohomish County, consistent with what had been done in the potential annexation area in King County. And I'm going to give you an introduction to some code amendments that will have to come back for further review. On the subsequent pages, urban design UD2, figure UD2, based on our analysis and feedback that we got, we think still has some relevance as a concept for a future north entry. But figures UD3 through 5 while they may still have some valid concepts, we thought were inconsistent with the current regulations for boulevards, so we propose to eliminate them. So here's UD2, and I've inserted just provisionally a new existing photograph here to show that there has been some changes since the last update. The development on that corner has gone forward since then. But the general concept for a gateway there with additional landscaping, I think, is still valid, and it's worth keeping this in the comp plan. And I think got some support from that from some planning commissioners last time. Other issues, the level of detail and the relevance of illustrations. Many of the detailed policies in this draft are left as background information for the regulations, but we've deleted some policies that seem too detailed, and there could be some further editing of those policies. But we removed the ones that seem to be obviously overly detailed for comp plan policy language. Similarly, with the figures, we've eliminated ones that either have been incorporated into development regulations or conflict with development regulations. And there were some differences of opinion about some of these illustrations, so I'm bringing them back to you one more time to try to see if we can get a consensus. And also still open to suggestions if there are other illustrations that commissioners feel should be added. And then just want to make sure that the illustrations, the previous bullet point was more in reference to illustrations that were in another document that were referenced in the comp plan, and that document wasn't readily available, so it wasn't very useful anyway. So those have all been deleted, but others that were actually in the document have been retained. The feeling was that they still had some validity and some usefulness, and but I wanted to make sure that there was consensus for keeping these. So these are the illustrations that came from the Snohomish County Transit-Oriented Development or Transit-Compatible Development Guideline that I think are still sort of good basic design background. Some more detailed illustrations similar to these have been incorporated into the development regulations, but not these exact ones. And then there were the series of illustrations of the lid concept over SR 522, and again, this is an area where there seem to be some differences of opinion. I did add an action or a goal. We'll get into it when we go page by page related to this. And I do think that while it's somewhat unlikely that we'll get to a point where this will be a viable, a feasible concept, it's still a possibility and worth retaining in my opinion. But I certainly defer to the commission there. And again, I've inserted a recent aerial photo as the existing. In fact, I've got two different ones. The existing illustration that was there, in fact, is still underneath that photograph, was of a larger scale area, like the previous image. I can get back to it. or we could use a closer cropped one that's more similar to the area covered in the illustration. Or we could use both, one for context on the first illustration and a tighter one for detail on the second. And then there's the third concept diagram of the section through that area. So I'll certainly entertain questions now or any time during the presentation. I would suggest that we do review the urban design text, and I've also got some preliminary code amendment text for you to review, and then feedback on any additional analysis or changes that you'd like for a possible follow-up session, likely on July 9th. That would be paired with the capital facilities element. So at this point, I could switch over to the document itself and do a page by page of the urban design, or continue through the PowerPoint presentation for economic development and then do the switch that as you prefer.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I think just from a process standpoint, maybe we could just discuss. I'm thinking that if we kind of closed out urban design, and so let's. I'm seeing some heads nod on that. So let's just stay with urban design.
Okay.
Maybe we'll give you some feedback on your presentation, and then if we need to do this page by page review, then let's just do it. And so let's do that, and that way we can kind of close this out. And I don't want to belabor it, but I want us to be as efficient as possible and move forward as quickly as possible. So let's kind of close out urban design first.
Okay.
So I'd ask any commission members right now, are there any feedback, questions, comments for Dave just on his overall presentation before we get into a more detailed analysis? Seeing none, I did have one question, and that had to do with figure UD2, Dave, and that is that's the one figure that you're proposing that we retain in the document, right?
Correct. I did hear support for that concept of the welcome mat.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Now, can this illustration, though, right now it's called Entry at Thrasher's Corner, can it become kind of an overall illustration for all of for the boulevards all throughout and other entry points into the city as well? Or otherwise, it's like, why are we keeping just the entry point for Thrasher's Corner?
Well, one thing we could do is, I think it's, well, maybe it's not so clear that it is Thrasher's Corner, but one possibility would be to present it as an entry treatment at Thrasher's Corner, but in the text, add some text saying that this is this type of treatment could be done at other entries to the city. And
it's possible. I'm thinking more actually calling it entry point illustration or example of an entry point. I think when it's called Entry at Thrasher's Corner, it tends to just, at that point, you're just concluding that everything that follows is really to support that.
Okay. We could certainly do that to emphasize that. Would you think it would be appropriate then in the finer print to say that this is an example of how an entry could be dealt with at Thrasher's Corner?
Yeah,
and,
of course.
and then, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So that's just my thought on that.
Okay.
So I guess just real quickly, so UDs 3, 4, 5, I guess it was 3, 4, and 5. Are we all agreed we're all right with having those illustrations eliminated, or is there any feedback and comment?
I have one comment, or I guess question, it's escaping me right now as to why we specifically decided to eliminate those. And along with that, I guess I kind of agree with Steve's comment that I think wherever we can at one of these entry points we'd like to be able to, I think, choose from a menu of options for that entry point. And I see on several of these, like on B, there are a couple things that are on this 228th Street Southeast on UD3, there are a couple of ideas here or proposed items here that are not on the first one. And what I'm wondering is that should we have a list of the preferred amenities, I'll call it for lack of a better word, that might characterize an entry point into the city?
If I can just jump in on and kind of tag along on that, I like the idea of kind of an entry point example, and so this is so it could work for Thrasher's Corners and others, but then another one so like UD4 is a streetscape. So here's a streetscape example. So that way we're not really losing that, but it's not just specific to one particular part of the boulevard.
Right.
I don't know what the rest of you feel about that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure why we eliminated those
Right.
other three.
Well, UD2 is a little bit different in that it's the entry treatment, and I did hear support for keeping that as an element. The other three are illustrations of boulevard treatments on different roadways, all of which are inconsistent with our current regulations and also inconsistent with to some degree with the changes that I'm proposing tonight on the development regs. So if
Well, that's
we
a
were
good
to
point. If they're
retain,
really heading us in a direction that's inconsistent with our code, then it's a picture not worth seeing.
yeah. So just to give a quick example, the code currently calls for 10-foot wide planting strips between the sidewalk and the roadway, and clearly this is maybe 2 or 3. And it's also really too narrow to support the kind of street trees that are in it. So there are a number of inconsistencies there. And so I think that the UD3 through 5 would really need to be completely redone if we wanted to keep those. If you do want an illustration of a boulevard treatment, well, one idea that popped into my head would be to use one of the renderings of the multi-way boulevard just as an example, even though that's kind of a unique example. It's not something that we're planning to do in other parts of the city, but or actually we have another maybe better one would be the rendering of the Crossroads project, because that's more consistent with what the other boulevard treatments might be like. And it would be a way to use a more up-to-date graphic to illustrate that kind of, and we could annotate it with, like you said, a menu of some of the elements that a boulevard treatment would have.
I like that. Let's go forward with that.
Could I ask one
Sure,
more
please.
question? The second one that you just suggested, the Crossroads, is that what you called it?
Yes.
Is that built now?
Yeah, that's the 520. So we could also use photographs, although the advantage of the rendering is it's rendered with more mature trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm wondering is if we could also maybe in it at least provide a reference to that particular location, so that, because I think it's important to be able to talk about this and read this plan, but then be able to go somewhere and see it actually implemented.
Yeah.
So maybe we could have in there a reference to that particular intersection. If you want to see an example of kind of the idea of what we're trying to do here, we go to that intersection or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, I would be inclined to include a key map like this. This one's barely legible, so I think we can do a better key map there, identifying where it is. May even be an opportunity to do a couple of them. You know, the Crossroads. Also, we've recently completed Wayne Curve, which is a slightly different type of boulevard treatment. So I don't know that we have any particularly good renderings of that, but maybe we could do that with a photograph. So I'll look into both of those.
Good. I think you're getting our idea that we'd like to at least keep that picture of both an entry point as well as a streetscape.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other? I was really the only one that raised that issue, so I'll assume that there aren't any other questions on your presentation. So at this point, do you want to go through the goals, policies, and actions?
Yeah. Or actually, the entire text of the urban design element. Is that large enough for you to see on the screen? No. No, okay.
But I think we have these in front of us, right?
Yes. I haven't changed the, oh,
So we're looking at UD1. So this would be my kind of procedural suggestion, and I would suggest, rather than going through and reading every change that you've made on every page, Dave, why don't you assume that we've read it, which I know I have, and why don't we just say UD1, and then is there comment, questions, changes, affirmations, and we'll make them quickly, and then we'll just move forward. Is that suitable for you?
that sounds good. There are a couple of places where I want to bring up some points
Sure.
for your discussions.
Yes. So
Yeah.
don't want to limit you, but at the same time, I want to, in the interest of time, kind of move forward here pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
absolutely.
So why don't you go ahead and just
So
Lead
I don't have anything specific on UD1. These are pretty straightforward. Were also in the packet last time. Basically, just some refinements of the definition of urban design.
So I think you've got our support for that for UD1.
Okay. Similarly, for UD2, it's not called out, so I did add reference to actually an important reference for urban design is not just the regulations, but the design and construction standards that we use for especially for street design.
I think we're fine with UD2.
So UD3 is where we start to get into some of the additions related to the campus.
And then you also were talking about, this is kind of first where we start to hear about the Bothell Business Loop and Bothell Circulator, right?
Yes.
Any comments from the commission on this particular page? I'm not seeing any. I had one comment, and that is just on the business circulator. As far as the University of Washington language, I'm totally supportive of it. And I'm not seeing any changes from any of the other commissioners. So I think we're fine with that language. The Bothell Circulator, can you just give me a little bit of background on where this came from and what the thinking was? So I don't want us to be too quick to just eliminate it. In my mind, it sounds like a good idea, but there's probably some other priorities ahead of it that I'd at least support. But I'd like to just maybe some of the other commissioners remember as well. I don't know, Pat, if you have any background on where this came from or not.
I don't think he's proposing to eliminate it, just calling it by a different name, aren't we?
Well, there are places, if not here, where in the future, it does sound like we're talking about. Are we talking about potentially eliminating this language as a goal?
I haven't proposed it, but there has been some discussion about eliminating. I think Commissioner Bacciuello
Right.
thought that it was a low priority. I don't think just being a low priority necessarily means it should be eliminated,
Right.
but could be moved down on the list of goals and actions.
So I think one question I had, and I don't know if you remember this, Pat, or not, was just the funding for this. How is this going to be? Where's the revenue going to come to make something like this a reality?
Well, that was one reason why I questioned it being in there at all, because there was no. It was mentioned as an idea, but as a notion, but there was no discussion of how to implement it. And And I don't know that it's necessary or even appropriate in a comprehensive plan to get into any details about the funding. So what I've added for consideration is just some language and action to explore options for implementing this with the transit providers and with the major employers, including the University of Washington Bothell, who did support this pretty strongly. It's something that they hear about a lot. So that's as far as I've taken it so far. There are goals and now actions related to this further down the list here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. There's a lot of, I mean, like the LID, for example, aspirational goals where we're not really putting a funding model in place. Where's the particular figure that shows the circulator?
I didn't include it in the presentation tonight, but I do. It's available here.
Is it in one of the? I'd written down. I went looking for it. Is it ED2?
It is. Yes, it is ED2.
Okay.
So here is the figure, and we haven't refined this. We would certainly bring this up to date with our current mapping, and one suggestion that I had was possibly changing the symbol from a standard city bus to maybe a smaller circulator type van, which might be a more likely type of vehicle to use on this kind of thing.
Okay. Is the figure ED2 referred to, if not here, in the other parts of the document where the circulator or loop is referenced? Just so there's kind of a connection between the language in the text and this particular drawing.
It should be. If it's not referenced, we should definitely add. That was one of the points that I made, is that there needed to be some cross references. So I guess it's only referenced here in the note box, so it would be appropriate to add a, well, it does say that there are policies, let's see. Yeah, I think it would be appropriate to add a specific reference to economic development, transportation, and figure ED2.
Okay. And then the last question I had on this page just was in the last paragraph, is this residential development handbook for Snohomish County communities. So we're just proposing eliminating any reference to that throughout the entire element.
Yeah, I've left in the upfront references to this is where they came from, or where some of those concepts came from, but none of the specific references, especially the ones to page numbers in a document that's really not very accessible at this time.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other comments, I think we're ready to move forward to UD4.
So here we have a new goal added since the last session at Commissioner Baciuelo's suggestion to, and this kind of connects to some of the language in economic development, but basically acknowledges that that the private sector also has a role in shaping the urban design of the community.
Any comments or questions from Commissioner Clark?
I don't know if it fits within that goal that Commissioner Baciuelo suggested, but one thing I would like to see added in here, and I really don't have enough experience to know where it should go, but the idea of the flexibility in this, that we, and I think it fits well with that particular one, because partnering with the private sector does kind of, I think partnering with the private sector does kind of suggest that somehow flexibility is built into the process, and I think it's important to go from, to decide whether some of these things are going to be a may or a should or a shall. And I don't see a lot of shalls in here, but I think I personally think it would be worthwhile to put something in there that shows that the city is willing to be flexible and take creative ideas from the private sector and the public into account when they're interpreting their codes and when they're developing codes.
So would you suggest perhaps adding a phrase to that goal, something like that adds value to the whole community while maintaining flexibility for private enterprise, or something, something to that?
Yeah, I think something like, I think getting it in there anywhere we can. Again, I don't know if, with Commissioner Batuella not here, I don't want to butcher what his suggestion was, but if that would be appropriate to put in there in that location, I'd be in favor of that.
Any other comments from any of the other commissioners on what Commissioner Clark has brought up?
Is there support for adding a phrase like that?
I'm supportive of it. So I think we have 2 yeses and 3 neutrals.
I'm just trying to parse it.
We don't necessarily need to nail the language precisely. We can.
Let's go with that for right now, Dave.
Okay.
Any other comments from any of the commissioners on this particular page? Before we leave this, I did have one, and I brought this up before. I'd like to really get the feedback from the other commissioners on this, and that's UDG 3. Right now it reads, to reduce dependence on the automobile through building, site, et cetera. I would prefer language that says, rather than reduce dependent, to promote transportation options through the building, and then really consider continuing with the rest of the language, promotes pedestrian, bicycle, transit usage as well as the automobile at the end. And that's my preference, but I'd like to know if the other commissioners,
Yeah, I would
I'm
agree
alone
with
on that or not.
I would agree with that. That makes
I
sense.
agree.
Pat or Mike?
I'm just looking at the final.
Yeah,
Nothing. I agree with everything. I just didn't. How did that finish up, Steve?
So I just
to
said
see it
to
written.
promote, rather than to read reduce
Right.
that we have this goal of reducing dependence on the automobile. I'd rather it be that our goal is to promote transportation options.
That sounds more optimistic.
Right.
Well, right, aspirational. I think it's a better goal.
Something like that.
Yes. Thank you. Anything on that kind of the bottom of the page there, as far as what are we saying here as far as leaving detailed policies, or you want some consider whether there's value in leaving detailed policies in place? What are you asking of us?
Well, so that was a comment from last time. Since then, so that's a general comment that applies to the entire policy section. So since then, I have gone through and edited out, if we move forward, some of the more what I found to be the more egregious examples of overly detailed policies. Relatively few. So I took a light editing pen to it. I think that the ones that I left, I thought still were valid as policies and didn't overstep. But there could be room for additional tightening up of that language.
I think I think there's general agreement up here that if there's a place to eliminate some of the detailed, they're not really policies. I mean, that should really just be in the BMC. There was one place where you were talking about eliminating, specific wall materials, I think, and if you know what, remember
I think
that?
that's one that I did.
Yeah,
Strike
and I'm
out.
going, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't seem like that is needed in a document like this. So, okay, let's move to UD5.
I've got a comment on that one.
Yep.
Top of the page, bullet item 6, special landscaping treatments at gateways to the city, including welcome to Bothell signs, possibly incorporating electronic message displays to announce city activities. What is our overall stance on having message boards for private companies?
Private message boards are pretty limited. They're limited in downtown, I know, to time and temperature displays, and I'm not sure if they're quite that severely limited citywide. I'd have to double check on that, but I think there definitely are some limitations on message board and changeable copy signs.
Yeah, that was my guess. And if we're going to limit private businesses with message boards, then I think we have to be held to the same standard. And I would suggest that we not have any type of electronic message displays for the city if we're if we've got a strict regulation for private businesses as well.
Would there be a location where we could consider just having one, like maybe the new City Hall complex, where you have a reader board there that's, I mean, right now it may not work that well because that doesn't get a lot of traffic, but I think in the future, maybe having just, instead of having it at an entry point, have it at a central location, like kind of a electronic kiosk kind of thing.
Popkini Field.
Or Popkini Field, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a community gathering place, so something like that might make sense. But
And I think just removing that last phrase, specifically calling out electronic message boards, there doesn't preclude the possibility if in the future a
Right.
case can be made for that.
Right,
So
right.
it just, but I would support a deletion there if the commission would.
I think you have our support to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anything else on this page?
Anything else? Hearing none, let's move forward. So I think you can basically take support from us on your language changes here. Here again, it looks like we had the. I noticed here we had the lid. I made a note of it. I'm trying to see where that was.
Yeah, under UDP3, toward about a third of the way down the page, is the reference to the three figures that illustrate the lid.
Right. Okay. So, yes, I mean, I'm supportive of that. So I think we're ready. We can move forward.
Okay.
I had one question on UD7, and that is, in the middle, your comment, the following policy is based on a false premise that a gridded system of streets encourages cut-through traffic and has been problematic in its application to plats. I just wanted to get a little bit of background on
Yeah.
what's the problem, why staff is so strongly recommending revising this policy.
This was a policy that was added at the last update, along with code language, which has proven to be problematic. Basically, first, with the policy statement says that that it's a reality that a gridded system of streets will increase cut-through traffic, and I think that the conventional wisdom in planning field is that a gridded system of streets evenly spreads the does a better job of providing a good distribution. There is a need for a hierarchy of arterials and local streets within that gridded system, and we do have a challenge in Bothell with the topography. We can't always create those grids, so that in itself forces some pinch points and forces traffic onto certain streets. But what's happened in the implementation of this is that, and I do have some code language to show you when we're done with this, that this policy resulted in some code language that basically says that when you're building two subdivisions next to each other, you can't connect the streets. And we have older subdivisions that were built specifically with the intention of connecting streets to future development that now have dead-end stubs that don't connect to anything. When those regulations were passed, there was a recognition that we would still like to have pedestrian connections between those kinds of developments, and that there may well be a need for emergency vehicle access. That has led to some situations where we've built adjacent subdivisions, actually built a vehicular access for emergency vehicles, and then gated it off. Police and fire do not like that. They don't like to have to operate those gates or even the curb ramps that are often designed into those secondary connections. The residents in those then come back to us and say, well, we've got this road that connects us to our neighboring community. Why can't we use it? It's just become problematic. So I made changes here, proposed changes to the policy language that I think is more accurate in terms of the value of a gridded street system. It still keeps language in there about avoiding street patterns that encourage cut-through traffic, but I think we can do that through other means than simply not connecting our communities. Basically, what it tends to create is a super block style of development where to go from two houses whose backyards abut each other, you might have to drive a half a mile around to go around and pick up the kid in the adjacent lot. So that's basically the thinking there.
That's good background, and I know I was made well aware of this last year in my city council campaign, actually talking with various neighbors and some of the frustrations they have around that. If you look at a map of Bothell, we have very strong north-south routes, whether it's 405 or 527, the Bothell Everett Highway, or Meridian. I mean, there's just a lot of north-south, but east-west, there really aren't that many options for when you think about moving a fire truck from the main station downtown to the far west part of our city or the far east part of our city. They often have to go through some kind of very strange routes to get that, and I got brought into a couple of these particular situations. So I think I really support the idea of including that. If in our language we can at least begin to grid out a strong, and I don't know if we want to get to this level of specifics or not, but really that is the issue, and that is east-west movement inside of Bothell is difficult. Yeah. And I don't know if we want to do that or just keep the language you have here. But anyway, I know what you're talking about.
So again, the proposed changes here to move away from that concept that we don't want to connect our neighborhoods. And then there's more specifics. Well, actually, we're actually proposing removing a lot of specific language in the regulations. But we can get to that later.
So, enough on UD7. I'm fine with it. And I think the rest of the commission is as well.
On UD7, and this was we had a lot of, in our last go-around, there was a lot of people that came out and supported this. And I was one of the people that voted against doing this. And I thought I couldn't imagine telling a fire truck that he couldn't go from one development to the other. I just thought this was a really bad idea. And I'm glad we're revisiting this because I still think it's a really bad idea.
Also on that page, I've been picking out certain specific statements, like, for example, we have a statement, sidewalks along streets should be separated from the street by landscaping. Well, I think that was maybe appropriate when Bothell was strictly saw itself as in a more of a suburban mode, but as in downtown, we're definitely moving away from that. In fact, it didn't really even exist traditionally, where we do have streets that extend to the curb. Basically, any place where you have heavily used on-street parking, you're not going to want to have landscaping right behind the curb. So there are places for that, but there are places where other things apply. So I think it's appropriate to remove those kind of specific and general statements.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything new or particularly of note on UD8.
Any comment from the Commission on UD8?
P15. When I was reading through this a couple of times, I'm scratching my head going, what does that look like? Ensure that development on hillsides blends visually and functionally into the natural environment to the maximum extent possible. What does that mean? Can you give me an example of what that would be?
Probably a good example is, well, maybe a good example is the University of Washington Bothell campus. It was designed to follow the contours of the hillside there, and provide this sort of horizontal circulation spine through that area. The buildings obviously stand out and don't try to disappear into the hillside. And in fact, now the latest building, they've realized as they're expanding, they need a way to get to provide vertical circulation as they extend up the hill. So they've deviated from that pattern with the latest building. It goes perpendicular to the slope so that you can catch an elevator and get up to the ground level on top. So anyway, that's kind of the idea that work with the topography rather than fighting it.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any changes for it. I was just trying to get an idea as to what that meant. So.
UD9?
So here we see some overly specific language
Right.
being removed.
Yeah, I'm very supportive of that. I think the consensus is we're good with UD9, Dave.
Okay.
UD10?
And this is just deleting figure references.
The only comment I had on this, and it was kind of incorporated into several of the different policies on page UD10, and I'd like to see us have have it as a goal or a policy that wherever possible to try to have, especially our new development, not backing onto a busy street. And I have a couple of examples in my neighborhood of brand new houses where there clearly was an option of the cars could have been parked in the back, backing into an alley, and instead they're going to be, several times a day backing onto a 190th, which is a very busy street, and it's just an accident waiting to happen. And so
Literally having their parking back onto it.
yeah, so I don't know, that was the only thought that as I was starting to think about parking and as parking as it related to the traffic going by it, I was just thinking from a safety issue. So
I think we do have design standards that strive to avoid that. There's, I suppose, some situations where it's difficult. The policy UDP 28 addresses that in terms of having buildings face the street. And,
Right. Okay, that was my only comment. I think we can move forward. UD 11. Any feedback on UD 11? Hearing none. UD 12.
I looked at P36 and P38 and thought that they were redundant. They could probably be combined into one.
I think that's doable.
Yeah, I had the only thing I had noted on UD 12 was something similar to what Commissioner Stedman brought up. Was I wrote okay by them, but then I just made a comment that it might be okay to just eliminate some of these, like UD 36. I'm just kind of going, is this really need to be in a strategic document, or is that really supported elsewhere in the BMC or somewhere else? I mean, to me, it just was getting pretty granular. I don't know if that's what you were thinking or not.
I guess the only thing I can see difference between those two is one has to do with the architectural character, the other has to do with the architectural scale.
Yeah.
Architectural scale, they could certainly be combined, though,
Okay.
just by saying architectural character and scale of surrounding buildings.
Why don't we look at doing that? Right. All right. UD 13.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
David, as you've already noted, I think UD 13 is too much detail. UD P41, and that's I'd cut out a heck of a lot of that.
I think that was one I was referring to as well, kind of at the beginning of just, I mean, we're down to concrete coating, admixture, concrete.
Right.
It's like, do we really need that in here?
Right.
So I think we could, it starts getting into detail in the third sentence, really.
Yeah.
We could simply
Right.
keep the first two.
Yep.
Yep.
And then under UDA2, provide these policies to developers to assist them with project design. We do that already, do we not?
I'm sorry.
Very, very bottom of it. I'm sorry.
42?
Very, very bottom of the page. A2.
Just to
Oh,
go along with that, it looked like your comment was saying that we really are not doing that. That right now these policies are not being provided to developers, and it seems like we ought to be making developers aware of our policies, whether it's through this document or some type of abbreviated pamphlet or a page on the website or somehow developers
Yeah.
need to kind of understand where we're.
They have to know what the rules are.
Yeah.
well, we certainly do direct them to the development regulations. That is where the focus is, and I think we, in our pre-app comments, we have a boilerplate statement that they should also consult the comprehensive plan. But we haven't. I think the idea here was to take this urban design, these urban design policies, and just create a simple handout that any developer that comes in and inquire about, we would hand that to them, rather than asking them to pull it up online or but we haven't actually been doing that. If that's something that the commission wants us to do, we should keep it in there, and I can we can try to implement that as part of our procedures.
Well, I certainly think that there's got to be some type of communication method of our policies to developers so that they kind of understand the parameters we're asking them to develop within.
Don't we do that, however, by, with the requirements for example, on a plat, when you go through a preliminary plat approval, all these items are addressed by the particular planner. I think a lot of these actions and policies are addressed to be sure that the proposal is consistent with this. So it seems like, I mean, so you're talking about a more active, we're going to give you the stuff to you instead of saying, hey, you guys need to know that this is what your proposal is going to be evaluated based on.
Yeah, it's more of an upfront thing that the first contact with somebody who's talking about building in Bothell, we'd just say, here's our comprehensive plan policies, and
I think it's a great idea. I don't know how realistic it is because now that it's available for purchase, right? The comprehensive plan is. Is there some introduction document that could, for a new developer, that could say, hey, be aware, we've got a lot of policies and that sort of thing that address how we want to see things done. And if you don't do that, you run the risk of having your proposal either turned down or significantly modified or the process lengthened or whatever the case may be. But I do know that they do address this in quite a bit of detail during that review process. And I'm speaking more strictly about the single-family residential plats, but I think the same thing is true in the other types of development.
yeah, the checklists that find their way onto our various development forms are more keyed to the development regulations than the comp plan goals. So, I think the comp plan is, in general, does tend not to get referenced as much as because ultimately it is the development regulations that they have to build to. So, but I can certainly take that back to the department as something that the commission would like to see implemented. And I think the comp plan is available. Very few people actually. It's a huge binder right now. We're hoping to pare that down a bit, but we anymore it's mostly referenced as an online document. So, and we are hoping to make it once we get through all these changes, hoping to make it a much more user-friendly document online. But this would be a very small, just a little pamphlet that would contain these urban design policies.
Well, I actually wrote down the idea of a pamphlet. So some type of abbreviated document that a developer can grasp pretty quickly, and then if they want more, they can go online or go, know where to go to find more detail. So I think that should be an action.
Okay.
UD 14, are there any other changes? I mean, I'm supportive of the entire page myself, including the addition of A9. So
I would propose that we eliminate A8. I think art is very, very subjective. And to encourage or require incorporation of public art in developments,
yeah, that
Pretty
one
strongly.
I didn't really jump out at me, but I'm interested in knowing where that particular action came from.
Requiring is kind of a hang-up.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
Encouraging is a good word, I think.
encouraging is fine, but again, art is very subjective. What I think is very artistic, somebody else may find offensive, and vice
Yeah.
versa. So,
Could we take out or requiring?
I think we can. We do now have a percent for art program. So for public works projects, there is a requirement, or that a percent doesn't necessarily mean that every project will have a piece of public art, but we collect a percent of the total budget to apply for public art. But and I think in general we have to the degree we can, we have encouraged private developers to employ public art to enliven their facades and street fronts. But it's true. It is in the eye of the beholder.
So I think am I right, that wraps up the urban design element review that you wanted to make sure we accomplished this evening?
That wraps up the comprehensive plan language. I did want to, and this wasn't in your packets, and I'm afraid I even left my handouts behind, but I will include this in your next packet. If for nothing else, I think I would like you to continue this item to review some code amendments related to some of the direction I've gotten now on the comprehensive plan language. The boulevard regulations, as I've said, have been more often than not ignored, but we've had to get deviations from the boulevard requirements that called for a 10-foot wide planting strip on any of these boulevard streets, and almost invariably the Public Works Department will lay out their roadways with the WashDOT required lane widths and all the other features, and determine that it's just cost prohibitive to add another 10 feet in right-of-way acquisition oftentimes. So we do wind up compromising, and then, as I said, we've come to realize that not all roads are created equal. In some of our urban centers, we're developing new design standards, as we have downtown, that will say in certain areas we don't want to have a landscape strip. We want the sidewalk to come to the edge. We want trees and grates to create greater sidewalk area. So these are just some preliminary. I wanted to share with you this section. Let me. Here we go. Show some of the changes that I'm looking at. Changing the minimum 10-foot wide planter strip to a minimum 5-foot, or perhaps say 5 to 10. If minimum 5 is the same as we have everywhere else, but so maybe we need to somehow encourage something more than that minimum, because usually when we establish a minimum like this, it becomes the standard, not it comes the minimum and the maximum. Acknowledge that there are some areas where planting strips aren't warranted, and then the table itself just needs to be updated. Some street names have changed. Some Highway 527 from 522 to 405 has been decommissioned as a state highway. So, and we now have a little bit finer grain. We've got one kind of street tree treatment for the multi-way boulevard segment of Bothell Way, but we don't propose that. We want to keep that unique to that section and have a different kind of treatment there. So these blue rows are new rows to indicate that multi-way boulevard section and the crossroads section in the center of downtown. And this still needs some more work, but this is just the direction that I wanted to share with you, the direction that we're going with these code amendments related to the boulevard treatment. And also this one for Fitzgerald, 27th Avenue Southeast, 35th Avenue Southeast, 39th Avenue Southeast, which at the time of the last update was still undetermined which of those was going to be the boulevard route. I'm afraid it's still undetermined, and as you go through the some of the sub-area planning, there's going to be further discussion on whether we keep the 39th Avenue as a future alignment in our comp plan. So I wanted to this is probably something that we're going to wait until we've had that full discussion, but I just want to flag that that would have an implication for this table as well. And then one other related to the comp plan policy about the cut-through traffic and not connecting adjacent subdivisions. This is the code section that deals with that. It starts off saying that streets shall not be configured in a manner to promote neighborhood cut-through traffic, but it then gets on much more prescriptive, saying that that adjacent developments will not be connected if that could promote cut-through traffic. It goes on then to say we encourage non-motorized connections, and then finally that acknowledges that we do have to provide the emergency vehicle connections. Still need to do a little more research on this, but our initial thought is that we could eliminate all of these sections and rely on the design and construction standards for how we design our street pattern. But I'm not quite ready yet to say that we can do away with all that. We don't want to throw out any of the good parts here that may not be covered adequately in the design and construction standards. But that's the direction we're going. And that's that.
Well, yeah, thank you. I think it's good for us to realize that when we make these changes to our strategic plan, that there are then implications at the code level. And so thanks for making us aware of that. Anything else with regards to urban design, or can we close that out right now?
Yeah, what I would suggest is that you continue the deliberations on the urban design element in order to do a more full review of these related code changes. And July 9th is the likely date on the calendar. That currently has a capital facilities plan on it, but the other item that was on that night has been moved.
Well, I guess I just have to say I'm a little not really pushing back, but I'm a little surprised that we're kind of getting down to the code level. I mean, we could do this, couldn't we, with virtually every section that we're working on. I mean, I think that we're trying to stay focused on the periodic plan.
Well, that is. So this is a periodic plan and code update. So we are making recommendations for code changes where it's appropriate, where it's related to changes that we're making in the comprehensive plan. I guess that hasn't been the case so far, but next week when you take on the housing and human services element, that'll come to you with some proposed code amendments related to accessory dwelling units.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, we haven't really seen it thus far in our work, but this is maybe the first time where we're really going to go down into that level, and we need to be willing to do that. So you're asking for us to continue the public hearing on the urban design element, and will that be in the form of a public hearing as well?
Yes.
And we're looking at either July 9th. Which date in July are we thinking about doing this?
We thought that July 9th would probably be the best. Has the least other items.
Yeah, but if we can hold open the 23rd and 30th, if we don't need them to, then let's not do that. So let me put this to the commission. So let's, if someone would put forth a motion that would continue the public hearing on the urban design element to July 9th.
I make a motion that we continue the public hearing of the urban design element to July 9th.
Second.
All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. And so it's 8:09, and I'm going to suggest, not just to belabor our evening, but I think it might actually help us in our review of the economic development that we take about a 5-minute break. We've been at this for about an hour and 10 minutes, and we can just take a pause and reconvene at, let's just say 8:15. Of the periodic plan and code update, and we'll move now to our third review of the economic development element. So, Dave, go ahead. Did you have a small presentation that you wanted to give to us on that?
Yeah, very short one. Just actually 3 images. So the changes that were made since the first at the last review included the University of Washington Bothell comments, changes that based on input from the commissioners at the initial April 30th hearing, and changing the Bothell business loop to a Bothell circulator. And then since our last hearing, where we really didn't get into the economic development element much, I've made some extensive revisions based on Commissioner Bacciuello's input at that meeting, or just before that meeting. So any other recommendations by commissioners are welcome, of course. So next steps, any questions? Actually, I would like to go directly to a review of the economic development text, and then entertain questions as we go along. One question that came up to me as I was presenting some wayfinding signs to the Downtown Action Committee today is there was or has been an effort to start branding downtown Bothell as Bothell Landing, and that I think was maybe not on the forefront of many people's minds, but when we brought out these new wayfinding signs, that's the banner title. So it made me wonder if that should be acknowledged in the economic development text, that marketing effort. So I'd like to move directly into that text, and then if there is any need for follow-up, we could also continue that to July 9th as well.
I think you have our support to do that, Dave, and I guess I would ask that as we go through this, just assume, as we did before, that we've read, and so we don't need to really go item by item.
Right.
But we've read it. If we have comments or questions, we will not be shy to bring them up.
So here we are on page ED1. And the changes are noted in bold in the text box and in bold in the revisions as well.
Comments or questions on ED1?
Yeah, Dave, we're at the very bottom of the page. It says Growth Management Act contains the following goal: promoting economic development. Economic development, and then a definition. Where does that come from? Is that the state's definition of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's basically the state the framework for our economic development element. Even though the state hasn't funded work on economic development elements, Bothell has included one in the comp plan for the last 2 revisions, and we think it is an important element.
I'm going to jump ahead to the next page because that section goes. It's the very top of ED2. It says promote economic opportunity for all citizens of the state, especially for unemployed, disadvantaged persons. City of Bothell doesn't have any responsibility for anybody outside the City of Bothell, so I don't know if that makes sense to have that in there where it says for the state. Number one. Number two, we talk about unemployed, but we don't talk anything about job creators. I don't know of a single unemployed person that's created an economic opportunity, but there's a lot of job creators that do. So I don't know if we want to incorporate that into this definition or not, or
You know, we do talk about promote the retention and expansion of existing businesses, but I think to his point about kind of under especially for unemployed and for disadvantaged persons, I would agree in terms of if we really want to call out specific groups, and we're talking about economic development here, to have job creators be one of those that we specifically call out, or we don't call any out at all. But at the same time, this is language right out of the Growth Management Act. We really can't change it, can we?
We can't change it. We don't need to include it necessarily. But I guess it's there to provide some context, the state context for the act, and then it moves on to
And that's
talk about the
basically
county
just
act.
that's just the kind of the overall paragraph inside of the GMA on economic development, and we're just providing that paragraph. Did you have any kind of?
no, it just kind of jumped out at me, and that's why I was asking if that's a state, paragraph from the state, or if that's something within us. So
I think I understand the comment. I noticed it as well, but I think I'm okay with leaving it as is.
Okay.
I think.
Would it help to specifically cite that as from the Washington State Growth Management Act?
actually, I think it would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe do that. Any other comments on ED2? The only comment that I would add, Dave, on ED2 was Commissioner Bacciuello made the point down towards the bottom that these 6 categories, regional activity centers, community activity centers, et cetera, are not really economic activities, but they're where economic activity is going on, right? But it's kind of it is. I don't know where that term came. When I think of an activity center, I'm thinking of like a, athletic activities, or I'm not thinking of economic activity. But is that an industry standard term? Regional activity centers, community activity centers, neighborhood activity centers.
I don't know if it's standard in the practice. It's the terminology that we've used here in Bothell. I know for at least a couple of rounds of the comprehensive plan.
Okay, all right.
And actually, it is used regionally, and the terminology is a little bit different. Puget Sound Regional Council officially recognizes urban centers, regional urban centers, and Canyon Park is Bothell's urban center.
Well, I didn't have any. I'm not going to kind of provide some language changes there, so I just had the question. So, any other comments on ED2? I think we're ready to move forward.
I'm having a technical issue. My file just disappeared. I think I hit the wrong button. So I'm going to switch to the document camera.
And we have ED3 in front of us. Seeing none, I think we're actually ready to move to ED4. I think we're good with ED4, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
ED5. The only question I had on ED5, it looked like on figure ED1, this is in the first kind of third of that page. One potential neighborhood center at 228th and 45th is depicted on figure ED1. When I went and looked at ED1, I didn't see that on there. Maybe I just missed it.
Let me pull that up. So it's not on the current ED1, but it was on the proposed revised ED1 that was
Okay, so
that was in the packet. Yeah.
okay. All right. No need to belabor that then.
Okay.
All right, ED6, page ED6. If I could just add my strong support for including this language around retail and retail leakage and recruitment and retention of more high-quality retail, commercial, and entertainment options. I just wrote a big yes in caps with an exclamation point, so I'm very glad to see that in there.
Dave, in the very top paragraph, Bothell has evolved into a major regional employment hub that in 1998 ranked 4th in high technology jobs. Do we have any more recent numbers than 1998?
That's a good. Let's see if we can.
I will.
update that.
I will. I'm sure I can find something more recent than that.
Yeah. Good.
I mean, 1998, I was 6 feet tall and had no gray hair. So.
Any other ED6 comments? All right. ED7?
I'm looking at G1, and that's not really a goal. It's a comment, but it's not a goal.
Strong, diversified, sustainable economy.
Right. There's no verb there.
Yeah, I noticed that seemed to be, I had trouble parsing it. That
Yeah.
occurred on some of the other ones as well. I wasn't sure how to parse this page. Are we looking for verbs? Are they more nouns?
Yeah,
Well,
that's a good question, and Peter was suggesting that these.
Yeah, but they're not aspirational statements. They should be goals if this is under the goals section.
Yeah.
So I'm going to suggest we put those things back. Sorry, David.
In looking at this again, I'm not so sure. I think a strong, diversified, and sustainable economy is a goal. You can put words in front of it that say we would like to create or maintain one, but still a strong, diversified, and sustainable economy is a goal. It doesn't, I guess, in the actions section, you'd have to have some verbs to describe that, but here I don't think it's necessary. I don't really have an opinion about it one way or the other, but personally think it's fine either way.
I think that's what he was getting at here. Now, it kind of raised the question, are we going to do this throughout the comprehensive plan or just in this section?
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
But I did want to bring that forward.
What is staff's opinion on this? Because it'd be a big change.
Well, I don't think it changes the meaning. It's
No.
more of a stylistic change, and we did have a little bit of a discussion. I think it would be better if there was consistency throughout, but it's not absolutely required. We could have a section that had a slightly different approach to how the goals are worded, but.
So as I'm reading it, yeah, it looks like each one is, do we want to retain the to develop, to improve, to encourage, to increase, et cetera? I'm really on the fence myself. I kind of get Peter's point, but I'm not that opposed to the way it was written either. So I I don't have a real strong opinion on that.
You know, part of it's the wordsmithing, but part of it I wonder about is how measurable do these goals have to be? I mean, are they supposed to be abstract, or are they supposed to be something that we can measure and see if we achieved or not? I mean, for example, if you look at G5, I'm not sure how to measure that. It's, you know, local citizen support of businesses located in Bothell. That seems very tricky to quantify that. I mean, maybe if we were the NSA and we had everybody's credit card information, we might be able to do it. Is that okay? I mean, maybe it is.
Yeah, these aren't really intended to be measurable or measured necessarily. There are certain aspects of what we're doing here. When we get into the land use, there are some specific goals that we're establishing and targets that we need to meet in terms of land use capacities. But for the rest of the comprehensive plan, these are primarily aspirational. They're to set a direction and not necessarily to establish a benchmark that we're going to go back and measure later.
Well, to that effect, then in G4, he suggested
It does, yes.
adding a metric there by X% over time, which I mean, I like the idea of a metric, a measurable over time. I mean, that's definitely a good business metric principle. But if we do that here, but then we don't do it in others, I think in a way we're kind of opening up a can of worms. Do we really want to go there?
And I did comment. We're not quite sure how we would measure that one.
Yeah. What are the thoughts?
I agree. I had the exact same question on that. If we're going to in G4 say, increase per capita income by X%, and we put a thumbtack up there. Number one, we have to measure it. Number two, what does that do, or how is that affected by inflation and that rate, and over what time period? And oh, by the way, how come we haven't done that with the rest of the comp plan?
Yeah. Even though I like the idea of measurable goals and holding ourselves accountable for that,
Right.
If we're not doing that kind of throughout the document, I think that we
Just a little too specific, I think, for this
Yeah.
argument. That's
I also think that we may not have the expertise to try to put a percent on that as a
Right.
commission, or
Right.
even maybe as a staff without a lot of research and
Right.
that
Yeah.
sort of thing. So.
I mean, I actually, on that particular goal, went back and I actually have that data that over 10 years it's increased by 13.5%. So, I mean, those numbers are available, but boy, you cause a lot of work for yourself, and then what does that mean for the next 10 years? And yeah, I don't know. I think we're kind of headed towards not going there, Dave.
I would agree.
It seems like what and he's not here to tell us, but it seems like what he was trying to do is just send a point that it is important to continually raise wages, because
Yeah.
I think that
And I think we certainly all here
Yeah.
support that.
so I think maybe the statement by itself without the percentage is enough to convey that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's the point of the city. I mean, it's a good thing to have, but if that's in this, and again, maybe it comes down to what the purpose of these ones are.
Yeah.
I mean, from the city's end, creating a positive economic environment, but I think at some point it's got to hand the baton off to the businesses and let them
drive.
do what they do.
Yeah.
I agree, Mike.
Would we want litmus test? Would we want to turn away business that was hiring minimum wage jobs? I mean, minimum wage is not livable wage. If our goal is livable wage, we've just had this reoccurring theme where a lot of times these goals can kind of backfire and produce results that aren't actually what we want.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess, so where do we land there?
On G4 specifically?
Yeah, so I guess, are we deleting the I see the strike through that David has.
I thought I was hearing consensus for
Yeah.
limiting that specific.
Okay,
metric.
but to Mike's point as well, are we going to turn away entry-level positions? And so,
Yeah,
from my perspective, I think we take that entire goal out.
Yeah, I again, kind of along my idea with transportation of where I'd like to promote options and again, young people need entry-level jobs.
Right.
And so to just say we're focused on higher wage jobs, that's certainly not what I think is the best for our city. I think that variety of employment opportunities is really.
Maybe in that situation, his edit at the beginning is more appropriate because it used to say to increase. It used to say to increase. Now he changed it to highly competitive, and I think that is a reasonable goal to have highly competitive, livable wage jobs. That doesn't suggest eliminating other opportunities. It just suggests
That's one of our
making
goals.
sure that they are there.
Yeah.
But again, it begs the question is whether we should have a comparable goal for minimum wage jobs and everything else.
Well, I think we're pretty clear on taking out the metric. So
Right.
is there a consensus on whether to just take out G4 in its entirety?
I would suggest taking out G4 in its entirety. I think the other goals speak to what it is that we're attempting to accomplish here.
Can I take just a real quick vote of the commissioners on whether to keep or take out?
I
G4?
kind of, I like Eric's point that it's not exclusive. As long as we can be clear about that. I mean, maybe what we just need to do is make it a little more broad, which kind of overlaps with G6, but promote economic activity, including minimum wage jobs, highly competitive jobs, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I'd be much more supportive of that, of promote job growth.
Right.
And not get specific on whether it's of a particular wage level or not.
Yeah. So what about promoting job growth, including minimum wage jobs and highly competitive jobs, and everything in between?
I don't know if we need to even say that.
I think
Again,
once you say one or two,
Right.
you end up having to
Exactly.
kind of include everything. And but is the point of this? I mean, economic development is we're trying to encourage businesses to locate in the city of Bothell, correct?
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, is there a distinction between livable wage jobs and minimum wage that would be more or less likely to encourage businesses to locate? And I don't know that there is. I mean, I think a business is going to, we're not saying we only want businesses that offer livable wage jobs here. We're saying we want any business here. Baskin Robbins, for example, it doesn't probably have a lot of livable wage jobs. I mean, we don't want it here as a company. I think we do because it provides opportunities, like you mentioned, for younger kids, entry level, and that sort of thing. That is just as important as it, and maybe more important in some cases.
It provides ice cream. That's very important.
Well,
And really, when you start talking about unemployment at amongst teenagers and young people, if that's a goal, it's going to be these entry-level jobs that gives them that first opportunity.
my daughter just got a job at Baskin Robbins. That's why I bring it up. And
Yeah.
one of the things I really like about it is it's keeping her really busy.
It's terrific. So I think that it's good to have a jobs growth as a goal, but I think to get much more specific about a particular wage level, I don't really want to go there.
I agree.
How about just to promote job growth for the full spectrum of
Of employment
promote a
opportunity.
full spectrum of job growth
Yeah.
in Bothell?
Yep.
Sure, that sounds great. Yeah, I agree with your interpretation, Eric. Part of my concern is that if the language is ambiguous, then others may not interpret it the same way. and I just want to avoid the ambiguity.
Yeah.
So I like Dave's wording because
Me too.
Yep,
that's bulletproof interpretation.
And
I
furthermore,
like it, Dave. Go with that. Any other comments on ED7? All right. ED8?
Actually,
The-
before we leave the goals,
Yeah.
did we come up with a consensus on aspirational versus prepositional?
Oh, on that,
I'm fine either way. It seems like a style thing to me.
If it forces the entire plan to be revised to
yeah,
be consistent with this, I would say maybe we don't do it.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
there is
I think we've-
something to be said
yeah.
for just being consistent in what our goals language is throughout our plan.
Okay.
And if we're not doing this throughout, then
Okay.
I think, and we all appreciate the comments from Commissioner Bacciuello, but I think, Pat, any comment?
Well, we just changed, and we put I think the first two words you put on there, to pursue, on the job growth. So
Yeah.
we're kind of married to those. So.
Yeah, we kind of are.
So
Yeah.
I don't see changing it
Yeah.
unless they were talking about a whole. And that's why yes. So support of leaving it.
Let's leave it, Dave.
Okay.
We'll talk to Peter when he's back. ED8. Any question or comments on ED8? I had one, and that was the idea of the pedestrian bridge. It's been kind of a pet idea of mine that I was just surprised to see that pedestrian bridge got eliminated. Has it been eliminated or not?
Which pedestrian bridge?
Well, the middle of the page, kind of last bullet point there, potential development of a pedestrian bridge. What was the story there of how that got eliminated? And keep it short.
I think that was just, there was some discussion of a pedestrian bridge in the downtown plan, not the full lid,
Right,
but and the decision was to improve the at-grade, make the at-grade crossings easier, but you're right. I think that that policy language has to do with the lid diagram, and perhaps it should remain so that there's some language to support if we're going to keep those the lid diagram in the urban design section. We should it's appropriate to keep some supporting language here.
Okay. Anything else on ED8 you need from us?
No, I don't think so.
All right, ED9.
Oh, actually, so policy EDP4, dealing with the connector, Buffalo connector, it was one that Commissioner Bacciuello suggested eliminating. But I think we did we already cover that in the urban design section that we're going to keep that in there as a aspirational goal.
I think that's the case, that if we're going to keep that in our urban design, then I guess we would keep it here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
David, under policy 11, strip commercial development is strongly discouraged. While it may be discouraged, my suggestion is we actually take that out. Not that, I want to necessarily have a whole bunch of strip developments in here, but that, I don't know, it comes across pretty negative to me, and we're trying to keep this on a,
Just that sentence.
yeah.
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 Any other comments on that particular?
wonder if we could reword it to be more positive as opposed to eliminating it.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I just think, there's a lot of examples out there of cities that have a lot of strip development, and Bothell had that, and it seems to me is trying to get away from that. And I think it's a good idea. I think
Again, not that I'm all for a whole bunch of strip developments,
Yeah, I understand.
popping up in the city of Bothell. However, there might be another way to just reword it, or maybe we talk about what, the type of development, retail development that we would encourage, or that we would highly encourage, or something of that nature.
Yeah, I agree. Or in lieu of strip commercial development, look to develop such and such.
Right, mixed use, or something. So.
How about we eliminate that sentence and then put highly promote or something, strongly promote, or the idea being that we're really trying to move away from something towards pedestrian oriented commercial development and architectural distinctiveness.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
So I'm really just suggesting eliminate that sentence as Blake suggests, and then just say strongly or highly promote. That way we've kind of made the point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, I think we're ready to move forward. On ED 10, any questions or comments on that? The only one I had was EDP 16, maintain an active business retention program that annually measures and reports to council on business and job retention in the community. I don't think we need to have it here, but is there a place where we know how many businesses currently are in Bothell and how many were retained or how many we lost, and as well as jobs? I'm just asking the question. If we're going to annually measure and report, I'm assuming we do.
Not that I know of. That's not something that community development does. And
Does the Chamber of Commerce do that?
Well,
Well,
the
it's
greater
Secretary of
yeah,
State.
the Chamber of Commerce is something more than Bothell. It's Kenmore
Yeah.
and Bothell, and so I don't know. They may.
But can you see where? I guess it's what you're really measuring, because Secretary of State is going to have a list of registered corporations, but what are we really looking for here? Is it a business that has an office open in downtown Bothell, or it's kind of nebulous.
Doesn't finance do this with just how many business licenses are approved every year and how much money's coming in? Isn't that?
well, we do track that, and community development does issue business licenses. So we. But
and each license has a number of employees on it, that
Right.
type of thing also. So, that information's there.
Yeah.
Somebody has it and does something with it.
And I think what this policy is saying is that whether it's finance or CD, that the city should be tracking that and reporting on.
Is
on
this
that.
more of an action than a policy?
I agree.
That's just a question, but it sounds to me more like an action in support of one or more of these policies.
Well, and that was another comment, Commissioner Bachuelos, that we should make sure that we have an action for each policy.
Yeah. So
that
I
might
guess
be-
at the least I would suggest putting this as an action. Any other comments on ED 10? ED 11? I think the only thing that I would say on ED 11 was I was very pleased to see EDP 25 added. So I don't know that exactly, is this, you said staff received direction, so I'm not sure if that came from city council or where, but I really am supportive of this, so very glad to see that there.
That was from the initial review that the commission did, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Maybe I wasn't at that meeting, but I think it's terrific. Who knows, maybe that was one of my suggestions, but anyway. Any other comments on ED 11? Okay. ED 12?
One of the action items that, and we may do this, David, I'm not aware of it, but let me start over. I'll ask a question instead. For the permit process, do we have a fully automatic online permit process within the city?
Fully online permitting process? We're not yet. We're working towards electronic permit submittal and review.
Okay.
So we've taken the first steps, and we've done some initial training to get there, but we're not quite there yet.
That's one of the things that I would suggest we really take a good hard look at and move that up the ladder as far as importance. There's some other cities in the area that I know that do that, and the response from builders and developers has been quite positive.
So are you suggesting that as a new action?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. To develop fully online permit process or electronic permit process or something of that nature.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because we're actually back on ED 8, at the bottom, EDP 5, under proactively plan and communicate as soon as possible in the permit application process. I had written, how is this measured, and don't we have a new system for this? So maybe there is just a linking of that policy with an action around using this system.
Not to sound self-serving, but under A18, work with selected site selection consultants, real estate developers, state, local economic development. I would also suggest we add commercial real estate brokers.
Work with site selection consultants, real estate developers.
I've had conversations with mayors of other cities and just sitting down and helping them kind of plan through their own economic development, and they've come back and gone, wow, that's a great idea. So,
Do you want to just say real estate developers and brokers?
sure.
Why don't we do
Yeah,
that?
there you go.
And that way, in keep it a little bit broad that way, but why don't you just add and developers and brokers?
Okay.
I have a general comment about these actions, and in your preamble to this section, you say that the related policies are listed in brackets, not to be included in the final document. I actually really like this, and I've always, in my reading of the comprehensive plan in the past, and I've always had a hard time sometimes connecting between the goals, policies, and actions, and I think having this here kind of in a way almost shows an accountability, a matching of, how well did we develop actions that match the policies. And I think being able to pair them up is not only a good check for the city, but it's a good reference tool for anybody reading this. I'm wondering, could those be left on there that way, or is there a reason why they're not?
It's another one of those slippery slope questions that if we do it here, then do we do it
Exactly.
everywhere?
Yeah.
If we link the actions to policies, do we do vice versa, and do we do the same between policies and goals? So,
Right.
that was a response to Peter's suggestion that we have an action for each policy. That was my way of trying to double check that.
I appreciate you doing that.
As I got into it, I was realizing, boy, this could turn into a big project.
Yeah, I mean, that was to be able to see each action and the policy related. I'm sure that took some work, so I appreciate it. I appreciate the comment. And I like kind of mapping them like that. But then if we do it here, are we going to do it throughout the document? I think that's the only.
I agree. It is probably a monumental task. I almost
Yeah.
didn't bring it up because of that, but I think it's.
I mean, there are key places where there's a real need to cross reference where we do it more often between different elements where we weren't trying to make those kind of connections. But
So I think we're going to say go ahead and take them off since we're not doing this throughout the document. But I do appreciate the comment. You had a question about the Planning Commission could consider whether this is still a viable concept. This is I think we've spoken to that, right? That we're going to leave that in as aspirational.
which page are we on here?
ED12. Just up towards the top.
EDA 12.
Just the page you're on right now.
Oh, on the page.
Yep.
Referring to the Bothell's circulator.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Transportation.
believe we have
Determine that we're going to leave that.
keep it. Yeah.
Yep. ED13.
I would suggest we combine A22 and A24. It looks like it's from the Redundancy Department of Redundancy.
Fort Ranger King. Yeah.
And under A23, I don't know if we want to call out specific specific opportunities for somebody within the city, whether it's a city council member, whether it's the mayor, whether it's the city manager, whatever. But there are organizations such as ICSC, which stands for the International Council of Shopping Centers, that hold conventions throughout the year. That I think the last one in May had 35,000 business people that were looking for either, locations for their operations, or they were developers looking for tenants in their buildings as well.
I think also on that same one, we were talking about EDP 16 being an action, not a policy. I wonder if we could just expand on this particular action and accommodate that, moving that proposed policy over to the action section.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's related to job retention, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Just maybe add a item in there that says including annually measuring and reporting to council on business and job retention.
Which action are you referring to?
I'm on EDA 23, and I'm suggesting that the policy that was related to business retention that we were thinking might be an action, that we just move that from a policy to an action and combine it with A23.
Yeah, I'd support that. Any other comments on ED13? All right. ED14. I don't have any. I'm fine with leaving those in. Any comments? I think we're good.
Okay.
All right.
So I think those changes were straightforward enough that we can bring those back with when you review the overall
Right.
document.
So for this particular element, we really don't need to continue
Correct.
to July 9th.
Right.
All right, so we don't need to have a motion to continue this to July 9th,
Not
right?
this element. What we should do before we break up tonight is continue the overall plan and code update to June 25th for the initial hearing of the Housing and Human Services element, and for a study session on potential code amendments on accessory dwelling units.
So could I hear a motion articulated to continue the public hearing as Dave described, that's shown on our June 25th calendar?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. We do not have study sessions or old business. Reports from staff, it shows none. Is that right, Dave?
That's right. And I would like to apologize for the late notice about the council study session last night. There are 2 items going to council for public hearings on July 15th. And since they've already been through study session, it's not as important to have a planning commission representative, but we're taking food truck code amendments related to food trucks back to council on the 15th, as well as the miscellaneous downtown amendments that included, notably included the sidewalk cafe issue. So if there is anyone here tonight that would like to attend, represent planning commission, that would be great, or I could send out an email in a more timely fashion this time.
Why don't you do that, Dave? Okay. Go ahead and send an email out to us, and perhaps one or more of us will be able to join you.
Okay.
So any reports from members? The only thing I would ask in that is, please let me know if you will not be able to make the meeting on the 25th. At this point, I think we have a quorum. So, all right. Can I hear a move to adjourn?
Move to adjourn?
We are adjourned.